On this panel we have Amy Erickson, a lecturer in British Economic and Social History at the University of Cambridge, Margot Finn, Professor of Modern British History at University College London and President of the Royal Historical Society, Jo Fox, Professor of Modern British and European History at Durham University, and Pat Thane, who we saw pictured, a Professor in Contemporary History at King's College London. So I think if we go in order, we'll start with Amy.
Thank you. I have been asked to offer some reflections on legacy. And in this, I'm going to be following some of what Laura Gowing said earlier. I want to give you a cautionary tale, and that is the story of Ellen Annette MacArthur. Now, her portrait is, a rather beautiful portrait, is on the staircase. And we'll see it in the exhibition later if anyone hasn't seen it yet. Ellen MacArthur was the first head of history at Girton College, Cambridge, from 1886. Upon her graduation, indeed, she was teaching from the moment that she started graduate work with William Cunningham on economic history. She continued in that post until 1907, at which point she became the head of history at Westfield College. She was taking over from Caroline Skeel, who was off sick. She also taught at the London School of Economics in the 1890s and maintained close links there. She's known for her articles on medieval wage rates, for her contributions to the first edition of Palgrave's Dictionary of Political Economy, her famous article on women petitioners, and she re-edited Cunningham's 3 volumes of completely unreadable economic history to a single volume, Outlines of English Industrial History, which was designed for use in schools and which went to 13 editions in the US and the UK for teachers in schools to enable them to teach economic history. She was on the council of the Cambridge Teacher Training College from the 1890s, and she was one of the founders of the Historical Association in 1906. She was also dedicated to postgraduate research. She taught generations of influential historians, E.M. Leonard, Caroline Skeel, Lillian Knowles, Dorothy George, Alice Radice, Annie Abram, O. Jocelyn Dunlop, M.G. Jones, and just barely Eileen Power. Almost all of those went on to the LSE to do their PhDs because postgraduate work was not a possibility in Cambridge at this time, particularly for women, where it was difficult to do. In fact, for 7 years, MacArthur actually personally ran a hostel for women postgraduates in Cambridge because the colleges made no provision for postgraduates, no residential provision. She was on the local and executive committee of the NUWSS, and she carried the banner at the head of the University Women in the famous March to the Albert Hall in 1908. In 1912, she suffered from a serious illness. It's likely that overwork played a part. She remained a semi-invalid until her death in 1927, and at that point left the bulk of her estate to Cambridge to establish a prize for economic history, to be open to women and men students. At the point that she made her will, the future of women in Cambridge University looked rosy. In 1923, women had finally been granted titular degrees, not actual degrees. It allowed you to be called B.A. Tit. And they were allowed to attend lectures as a right instead of a privilege. In 1926, university teaching posts, prizes, scholarships, and studentships were opened up to women. So she thought the future was bright. She could not possibly foresee that women were only admitted to degrees in 1948, or that her bequest was managed by an entirely male committee until the 21st century. Until 1973, many of the prize winners were published in a special series by Cambridge University Press, which bears MacArthur's name. That prize was awarded to 31 men and 7 women until 2000. MacArthur does not appear in the published history of the Historical Association. She does not appear in the 4-volume history of Cambridge University. And it's clear from the records of her fund that she left to the department that many of the managers through the 20th century had no idea whose money they were administering. In 1960, that committee, in the 1960s, the committee that managed the fund decided that they would establish, because they had a surplus in the fund, they would establish a lecture series. And that was a means of inviting the manager's friends to Cambridge for a month to give 4 lectures. No information was provided to speakers on the identity of Ellen MacArthur, and she was never referred to in the lectures or in the introductions. The first woman to give the Ellen MacArthur lectures was Jane Humphreys in 2016. Only in the 1970s did the managers see fit to use their surplus towards postgraduate studentships, which would have been more appropriate to MacArthur's original intent. Now, I can understand that you might think this is a peculiarly Cambridge tale, but in the way that our bibliographies and our conference panels minimize women, and our letters of reference describe women in less glowing terms than men, so memory and legacy are also affected by implicit or unconscious bias. I have found, if anyone has missed it, Harvard's implicit.harvard.edu very useful, but also Virginia Valian's tutorials at City University of New York on the difference that even tiny fractional amounts of unconscious bias can make in end products of numbers of women lecturers and professors. Murray Edwards College at Cambridge has recently published the Collaborating with Men report, which I've also found very helpful. None of Ellen MacArthur's students mentioned her in the prefaces to their theses or books. They thank Cunningham in Cambridge, and they thank their male LSE supervisors. Now, it is possible that she was extremely unlikable. I don't know. I never met her. There's no evidence in the written record that she was unlikable. But it's clear that she wasn't uncreditable. Now, we might think that that was a long time ago. Even her students were a long time ago. But I recently attended a very specialist conference in my field and noticed that all of the men who had published in that field were referred to during the course of the conference. But only one of the 13 women who had made significant contributions to that field were mentioned, until I decided to stand up and list them all. So I would just like to say that legacy and archives, Ellen MacArthur left no archives, acknowledgement and honouring are still with us, and we stand on the shoulders of many people, and it matters whose stories we tell.
Thank you very much, and to time as well. So next it's Margot. Okay.
Thanks very much. I'm going to make 3 comments or sets of comments about glasses. Not this kind, which I see most of us in the room seem to be wearing, but actually this kind here. I am by nature, as I often admit or confess, a glass half full person. So I'm going to start with the glass being half full. I'm then going to move to the glass being half empty, and then I'm going to raise questions about who has access to the water, which is, I think, a triptych of things that we have to be asking ourselves constantly. So the glass half full, when I was a postdoc in the 80s, I was a postdoc with a cluster of 13 other postdocs at the University of Chicago, fantastic job, got in my career, no complaints, but there were 2 women and 12 men. And of the 2 women who interviewed flat out because we were desperate to have careers, over 2 years we between us interviewed at 12 institutions, and there were 2 instances between us when we weren't asked if we were married and if we had children. Of the chaps, and they were lovely chaps, they were brilliant chaps, they were great people to be colleagues with, They interviewed about 17 times, and between them they were asked twice. The change that we have experienced since then, it was already illegal to ask those questions back there, and they were consistently asked just across the piece. They were asked by deans, they were asked by people in the department, they were asked by people who knew better, they were asked by people who didn't know better. The kind of regime change that we've had at a formal level, never forget how important that is. It matters, absolutely matters, and that glass is emphatically half full. And a number of the people in this room have participated actively in making those changes happen. Absolutely crucial that we have those formal guarantees and that we ensure that they are enacted on appointments panels, that they are enacted on promotions panels again and again and again. And I think that there is a part of a really good story to say that. But, and I think here I'm going to resonate very much with Amy's comments, it's very clear, and I think the Royal Historical Society gender report, spearheaded by my colleague Vicky Miller, demonstrated this emphatically. We haven't, notwithstanding those formal equalities, risen to the levels that one would expect. And the implicit bias regimes are absolutely crucial. Trying to think as we look forward about how do we, whilst continuing to insist on the formal regimes, begin to negotiate more adeptly the informal regimes. And by we here I mean men as well as women, is I think the next step that we have to do, because that glass which is half full is also by that very nature half empty. The third point that I would want to make, and I think it's an absolutely crucial one that we mustn't leave this room without thinking seriously about, is who doesn't even have access to the glass and the water in the first place. It worries me immensely that the advantages, the not equality, but the beginnings of approaches to equality that we've enjoyed as women as a group don't extend to black and ethnic minority persons, whether they're female or men. And we just look around this room and we see that very, very clearly. We're all here, and we're all very white. And I think that as we think forward about equality, we have to remember that ultimately equality isn't for women, equality is for people. And in saying that, I'm not stepping back in any way from equality for women, to which I am fully committed. But we also have to remember that equality, feminist equality, is meant to be about equality. And to begin to think about ways in which some of the strategies that have worked for women, predominantly worked for white women, it must be said, might apply or might not apply to black and minority ethnic persons as well. And to begin to think of that level of equality as being essential to the kinds of discussions and dialogues that we're having here today. Because the ultimate aim, I hope that we're hoping for, is equality for women, but as a part of equality for persons. And we're nowhere near that today if we think of BME issues. So I'm finishing on my who has the glass, who has the water in it. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Margot. Now we have Joe Fox.
Thank you. Well, I'm going to use my 5 minutes, if I may, for a personal reason, and that is to gain some advice, because as a newly appointed head of department, I am in a constant state of feeling perplexed. And one of the issues, and I was told a number of times through my career, that if I reach a certain stage in my career, I would be able to change things, do things. Well, I've reached that stage, and now I find actually it's a little bit more complex than that. So I'd like to air some issues that I feel I am struggling to change. The first is actually to shift that mid-career block, and I'm talking here about men and women, and here about the promotion system. And one of the things that I promised myself as a new head is that I would finally crack that issue of the work-life balance. Set myself a small task to get with. And this is a real issue, because I think in one recent report beautifully described universities as greedy organisations that demand the elastic self, where individuals find themselves in pursuit of relentless working goals without boundaries in space, time, energy, or emotion. And this has real implications for careers. It's no surprise that in the recent REF submission, REF 2014, women aged 30 to 50 were not submitted as much as any other group. And there are clear reasons for this. And I have particular concerns as Stone shifts some of the dynamics here from an institutional level, devolving that down to departments. Who will decide who is submitted with 0 publications or 6 publications, in what circumstances and under what context? And I have a slightly unnerving sense that things will become less transparent. I'm also concerned about promotions criteria and to the extent to which they genuinely take into account the diversity of careers and specific equality and diversity issues of all kinds. And then there's the dilemma that when you do make it into the mid-career stage, in order to meet certain institutional targets relating to diversity and equality, women find themselves overstretched. They find themselves on every committee going and on every appointment panel going, and because there are so few women at that stage, they find that there's one thing that gets pushed every single time, and that's their research, and that is, of course, the thing that they need in order to progress further. So one of my concerns has been to start to shift that number of women moving from senior lecturer, reader, onto the professorship. And I was a bit disturbed to see that we're really making no headway, despite all of the initiatives over the last 10 years in shifting that number of female professors from that 20% mark. 20.79 still in the 2015 HESA data. And some of this comes a little bit when I started to look across all of the CVs, thinking about promotions in my own department, and wondering why certain profiles were coming up in the way that they do. And something for us to reflect upon as a discipline, as I know has been happening in past and present and the Economic History Review for some time, is transparency over publications in the top journals. One of the first things I came across when I was Director of Communications at the Royal Historical Society was another subject association calling out history on the absence of women on editorial boards, and in one journal in particular, no women on that editorial board. And I wondered actually how widespread that is in terms of representation on editorial boards and peer reviewing. And I also began to wonder whether there was such a thing as a gendered writing style, one more likely to appeal to reviewers. Who are the reviewers? How do we know, as a subject community, that that is balanced? We know a little bit more about editorial boards, and we know where few women are present. And what kinds of history do each journal publish? Are there trends that correlate to what we know of the gender differences in sub-disciplines? And if the reviewers and editorial boards have certain preferences for kinds of history, preferences that may be gendered in and of themselves, how effective is the defence that bias is eliminated by anonymity? And there are just a few problems, I think, that I face as a new head of department seeking to shift around, but I think they start, when you start to unpack these very local, specific problems, they start to have greater ramifications for the discipline as a whole.
Thank you very much. And now on to our last speaker.
Thanks. I wanted to start by raising an issue that I don't think we've discussed this afternoon, which obviously concerns a lot of women in universities. And these have been alarming revelations in The Guardian recently about the extent of sexual harassment in universities. I have no idea how prevalent it is in history departments. But it is alarming, and also we can't tell whether it's actually going up or whether people are reporting it more. And I hope it's the latter. And I believe no one said myself, and it obviously is an issue of concern for women and should be for men, which, well, perhaps we can talk about later. I'm going to go on to talk about myself instead. Because my experience is different from many other people's, because I've never taught in a history department. So although I spent a fair amount of time in London, I don't think I'd appear anywhere in Caroline's statistics. I've been in social science departments mainly, and Maxine was right, that there have always been historians, some of them women, in social science departments, languages departments, and elsewhere around the university, who've made a contribution to history. I, having done history at Oxford, went to LSE to study social policy because I was impressed by Richard Titmuss's work, thinking I'd move into social policy, but then was guided back by Titmuss and Brian Abel Smith to study the history of social policy because they wanted to know more about it. And so I spent most of my career trying to educate social policy specialists in history, sometimes successfully. When I started at Goldsmiths in the late 60s, I was already married with a 3-month-old baby. And in fact, I was very obviously pregnant when I was interviewed, but this wasn't a problem. And nor, unlike Caroline's experience we heard about, did I ever find it a particular problem being married and mothering. In fact, my head of department very quickly said to me spontaneously, "You don't have to come in except when you teach," which is a bit hard to imagine now. And I didn't publish anything for 10 years because there was no pressure then with something else which has changed just dramatically. And it hasn't exactly harmed my career since I did stop publishing. But I certainly haven't regretted not being in history departments. And I used to, when I was teaching at Goldsmiths, I used to come to seminars here at the Institute to keep in touch with historians. And I remember feeling profoundly glad I wasn't in any of the London history departments. And I've been a bit puzzled about exactly why, but I had Caroline's statistics showing how few women there were in history departments in the 70s and 80s when I was coming to seminars. And Dinty's account of her experience of male-dominated seminars, and he explains it. Because my department at Goldsmiths, I don't think there was gender equality, but I wasn't aware of it as being male-dominated, and there were quite a lot of women colleagues. So I didn't feel that, whereas I felt a real contrast between the experience there and the experience among historians here, much as I valued the seminars. Then in the early 90s, about 93, I went to Sussex as Professor of Contemporary History. And I remember when I was appointed, counting how many female professors of history there were in Britain. And there were 8. And it's not great now, as we've heard, but it has got better than that. Things did improve in the 1990s. But even then, I was astonished that there were just so few. And of course, Sussex, again, when I was a professor of history, was still an interdisciplinary university. And historians were spread into 5 interdisciplinary schools. And I spent half my time teaching sociologists, economists, political scientists. So again, it wasn't the history department. Then I came here to the IHR in 2001 to the Institute of Contemporary British History, which I guess is the closest to my being in the history department, but it's hardly a conventional one. Then we moved the Institute to King's in 2010, but we've never been in the history department, and are now part of the Department of Political Economy, because contemporary history often is taught in politics departments. And all this time, of course, I've been doing history, and including trying to integrate women into any of my teaching, and I've written about the history of women among other things. But it's been, I think, a rather different experience, different trajectory from the others we've heard of, so I think it's worth going on about it.
Well, thanks very much indeed.